Well, friends, it's that time of the year for spring cleaning. It has started at our house, and the annual process of tidying and dealing with things that I have been putting in closets, putting on shelves, or if I lived at one household, putting under the bed or under the couch, we heard about. And so we get to the time of year where I get to be thinking about the strategy around this. And many of you are familiar with this idea of when it comes to an overwhelming cleanup project, the three piles method, right? The first pile being the things that you said, these are the keeps. Then the next pile is the purge, the throwaway, right? And the other one is the donate, sell, give away pile. So when we talk about spring cleaning, we're gonna use this as a broader theme for the next couple of weeks. We're gonna be talking about spring cleaning and cleaning as a metaphor for some of our priorities in life. And so today I want to talk about the things that are in the keep pile. Next week we'll talk about the purge pile, and then the last week we'll be talking about the give pile. So when it comes to keeping things, I'm good at that. Turns out, I don't necessarily think of myself as a super sentimental type of person when it comes to possessions, but when I look around, I see in my house, I see that I am. I have trouble getting rid of some things. There is a clear plastic bin that I keep, and it has what I guess my wife would probably refer to as all of Tyler's preciouses, my little precious things. And in these are, let me just give you a smattering of things that is in there. Notes that somebody's wrote to me that were particularly meaningful that I kept. Maybe a sticker that I got at an event. A souvenir from a trip. I used to collect when I was a child little elephant figurines. There's a few elephants, tiny little elephants in there. I think there's a broken Zippo lighter. Just this like stuff that I have collected over the years, and photographs and knickknacks and souvenirs from trips, all of those other things, but I can't remember everything that's in there. And you'd think that with this box that has been moved with me from my childhood home to my first apartment, to my second apartment, to my third apartment, to my first parsonage, to my first house that I bought, to the second house that I bought, to the next parsonage that I live in now. This thing has gone with me, this plastic bin, each and every step, and I carry these precious, beautiful, wonderful items with me everywhere I go. And would you like to know where that box is kept? In the garage. In the garage, right next to other precious items like my chainsaw, dusty camping equipment, and the boogie board, right? So it's on the shelf with all of these things. I don't go through this even once a year during the spring cleanup project. I don't go through this because I know these are off-limit items. And you'd think that, oh, well, at least if they're in a clear plastic bin in the garage, you'll see them every day as you are going to and from the house, except for that bin is by Eleanor's car. So I don't see them and I don't think about it, and sometimes months go by without thinking of my box of treasures. And I don't even know what's in the box of treasures. Maybe a baseball card or two. Maybe a bookmark that somebody had given me with a Bible verse on the back. It's those kinds of things. And when I think about it, I've also got a drawer of that elsewhere in the house. A couple of them, in fact. And I know that Eleanor is going to pretend that this is my thing, but she's got these things too. Hers are in bowls. And she's got a bowl on the kitchen counter, and there's another bowl that got put on the dryer in the laundry room because that got moved so that we didn't have two bowls of knickknacks when the company came, right? So it got put in the laundry room, and now it just lives in the laundry room. And some of you are like, you're making me crazy talking about this because you can't imagine living this way. And others of you are like, yep, that's me, or that's my spouse, right? And you have the exact same thing. And so it's an interesting idea that we have these things that are the things we cannot part with, that we know are special and important to us, but they get shelved, they get boxed, they get binned, they get tucked away in attics and crawl spaces and under the stairs cavities and garages in the back of the laundry room, right? And so these things get put out of sight and out of mind. And even though we hold them in this revered spot emotionally, we may have even lost track of their contents, at least in terms of our memory. So Stephen read this story about a king that doesn't get a lot of attention in the Bible. He gets a little bit more than a chapter in 2 Kings, which, hey, is better than some of the kings. And he's one of the only kings in the Bible that gets named as a good king, especially when we look at this particular era of kings. He's mentioned as a son of David in the text that Stephen read, which is more like from the lineage or the house of David. He's not a direct one generation removed descendant of David. He comes years later, and in fact, his father was a bad king, assassinated. His father before that, the grandfather, a really bad king, one of the notoriously worst kings. And so Josiah comes about in the story when we have had a long, multi-generational problem now with kings that have done the wrong thing. And when it comes to the kings that have done the wrong thing in the Bible, in the Old Testament, we're talking about kings who were drawn to worshiping foreign idols, who went against God's warnings in the form of the prophets, somebody that never sought wise counsel and just sort of shot from the hip in their leadership and did a lot of things that were probably self-serving. So these are the kinds of mistakes that the kings were making, and the people got on board and followed a bad king in a bad direction, and there was problems with that, and there were consequences to those actions. Well, Josiah seems to be from that lineage, but cut from a different cloth. So one day, as the temple is under construction, he sends his secretary and says, hey, go into the treasury, take a lot of the money that's in there, and it's time to pay our workers. Let's pay the carpenters, and let's pay the masons, and let's pay anybody who's been really working hard on this. And they've been fair with us, so as you probably picked up in the text, he says, you don't even need to get receipts. Just give it to them, ask them what you owe them, pay them, we trust them, they've been good workers. And so it comes from this good place. So Josiah sends him off to do this errand, and he goes into the treasury, and he sends his servant into the treasury, and they start to gather up this wealth. And as they do so, the servant of the servant comes across the law. Now, we think that this is probably a very early version of the book of Deuteronomy, but this thing, which we don't know how it got there, but just based on my own experience, I'm guessing that somewhere back in history, somebody said, hey, this is the law, this is the gift from God, this is the blueprint for how we live our lives. This is what Moses instructed the Israelites, and this is something that is defining. It is our culture, it is our God, it is how we live in community. This is the thing. And somebody said, that thing shouldn't be out in the open. That's a sacred item. Put it in the treasury where it will be safe. Put it in the vault under lock and key. And like the laundry room closet, or like the shelf in the garage, or like the attic or the crawl space, lo and behold, what happens over time is the thing that got put back in there for safekeeping then gets other things piled upon it, and then we forget the contents. We have no inventory of what's in the safe place. And when the servant's servant unearthed this thing and began to read it, he said, oh my goodness, I need to take it to the king's secretary. And so he passes it up the chain, and the next guy looks at it, and he brings it to the king, and he begins to read it. Now, we didn't read the whole version of the story because in the interest of time and because it's a little bit of a meandering story, but here's what happens. He reads it to the king, and Josiah says, holy smokes, guys, we have been way off the mark. We have gotten so far off course. And so he begins this period of massive reform. And all of a sudden, he sends his troops to go in throughout the kingdom, and they tear down the idols and the temples and all of the figurines and the statues that were erected to these foreign gods. And he says, these are no more. And let's burn these things down, and let's banish the prophets of these false gods. And it is a cleaning out. It is a cleaning house of reform. And it's time to go back to who God called us to be. And that's what I want to be thinking about with us now. This isn't really about literally cleaning house, but it's about maybe if we have gotten a little bit out of step with what the main thing is. Have we let all of the other busyness and the obligations or the current events or the anxieties or whatever it may be in our lives muddy the water, and we have lost sight of the main thing? Or have we shelved the things that were most important because we said those are too precious to touch? It's almost like the lecture that I give the third graders every year when they get their Bible on third grade Bible Sunday, right? Like, don't treat this as a trophy to go up on the shelf and never to be touched again because it's too sacred and it's too special to use. That's the antithesis of what we're hoping for when a third grader gets a Bible. So if you were thinking about what are the things that are most sacred, what's on the short list of most precious in your life? I'm guessing it's not going to be trinkets, baseball cards, stamp collections, and bottle caps, right? You're going to be talking about things that are not material things at all. Faith and family and friendships, values. Those are the things that are most important. And yet I think that if we do a pretty close self-examination, as much as we say those things are important, they also get pushed to the background. I'll tend to my faith after I've gone through my other checklist of obligations. When I have time for it, I will make this a priority, right? I want quality time with my family, but I got to finish this thing at work first. Or at first, we need to do a few of the household chores. Or I got to honor this other commitment, right? It's not malicious. It just sort of happens. I don't think anybody hid the book of Deuteronomy in the king's treasury saying, this thing's annoying, let's put it away and forget about it. It was done with good intentions, but it just sort of happens. Friendships that just sort of take a back seat to the busyness of life, and then you realize that you haven't had any correspondence with somebody for weeks or months. The values that we say that this is a priority for me, but we compromise on them because it's too difficult to do that, or we don't want to be inconvenienced by this thing that we say is important to us, but honestly, it represents a challenge. So the question is then, how can we take these things that we say are the most important things and take them out of storage, out of safekeeping, out of the vault, and we put them somewhere else in the foreground, where we say, this is the place where I'm going to see these things. These are the things where I'm going to be keeping a checklist of these things. In other words, it's an accountability system. And some of you have things that work really well for you, sticky notes on the mirror, or a note taped to the dashboard, or a little reminder that pops off on your phone and that tells you about some things, and those are all perfectly effective strategies. But I think just more symbolically speaking, how do we take the things that are supposed to be, the things that we claim are the most important, and put them in a place that they are most visible to us? Because I think King Josiah's and his kingdom's lesson here is that it can be easy to say these things are so important to me that I'm going to tuck them away instead of putting them somewhere where I can emphasize them and be reminded of them and held accountable to them. And so what does that look like then? And just very quickly. it looks like the kind of things that Jesus is talking about. When Jesus is basically asked the question, hey, what does the law look like to you? Or what is the stuff that we shouldn't have in the vault, but instead we should be living out in the open? He says, that's easy. Love God. Love neighbor as yourself. Seek first the kingdom of God, by which I believe he means work for justice and peace and mercy. In other words, love God, love your neighbor, and be a citizen while at the same time being an active builder of the kingdom. That's the priority list. That's it. If you can do those things, you got it pretty well covered, right? Because when Jesus is asked about the commandments, he says it's summed up in the one. Love God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Boom. That's it. So how are we putting that out in the open? How are we reminded that that is not about something that we bury for safekeeping, like the parable that tells of the various servants that got shares of money, and the one who buried it for safekeeping was called wicked? How are we putting these things out in a place where they are visible to us as a reminder and to the world as we bear witness? It's a question I'd like you to ponder in this season of spring and cleaning, and what it is that we're emphasizing. So what's in your keep pile? What's sacred to you, and so sacred that you say every day, this is a priority. Every day, this is a high visibility thing for my life. And every day, others should know what's in my keep pile by the way I live my life, by the values that I hold, and by the ways that I love and serve my neighbor. Let us pray.